activity that was called Craze for the Maze. And what it was is we go through a corn maze, and each group had an adult leader, but it was in the pitch black of night, like 11 o'clock at night, then we'd go. And so you had your little flashlight, and you take a map with you, they give you a piece of paper and a crayon. And scattered throughout the maze was these stations, and you put, it's like 3 pieces of wood, you slide the paper in, scribble with the crayon, and there was like carvings in the wood, and it would do the map, and so you could go to the next station through the map, right? And they give you a prize, like a Chick-fil-A gift card to the winning team, so everyone wanted to win. But it wasn't the team that got out first, it was the team that had the completed map first. And so you'd be going around and you'd have one left. And you'd be going, and you'd go and, I've already been here. And so then you go to the next one, and this one looked brand new. And you were so excited, you're like, yes, Chick-fil-A, here we go. And you'd scribble over it, and you've already been there. And then you go and you're like, I've already been here. I was just here. And it was so frustrating because Chick-fil-A was this close, and you were looking for that stupid last station, and you kept going to the ones you'd already been, and of course it's a maze, so it's confusing, and it looks like where you've already been. And I feel like that's how God looks at us. He's at heaven, and He brings stuff into our life. He brings different times where we're supposed to grow, and we're supposed to become more like Christ, and in the image of Christ. And then we forget about it, and we don't look back on what He's done, and then we start right back where we were, and He's looking down from heaven saying, you were just there. Just like the corn maze, I kept going to the same station, and I was just there, and it was so frustrating because I wasn't getting to where I should have been. And that's what happens in our lives. So tonight we're going to look at 3 different times that God uses in our life to build us, and what we can do so that we don't forget, so that we can truly grow. Because a Christian cannot truly grow if he doesn't remember what the Lord's done through the 3 different times. The first time is miraculous times. In Exodus chapter 14, the Red Sea had just taken place, and the biggest miracle that Israel was going to experience. And so 15, chapter 15, they sing a song, and we see 2 things. First of all, in verse 2, it says, the Lord is my strength and my song. He's become my salvation. They went through the Red Sea, and God had saved them from the Egyptian army. God had saved them from slavery, and they were dependent upon Him. The Lord was their dependence, but not only that, He was their thankfulness. In verse 11 it says, who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the little g gods? Who is like thee? They said, God, I'm so thankful for you. You don't even compare to the little g gods. There's no one like you. They were so thankful. The miracle caused growth. But the saddest verse in that chapter is verse 24. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? 3 days. They had just seen the miracle of their life, and 3 days later, they had already forgotten about it. They made progress. They depended on the Lord. They trusted. And then they forgot about it, and then they looked at the problem of where they were, not having water, and they started murmuring, and they were back to where they began because they had forgotten about their miraculous time. The second is maturing times. In Daniel chapter 3, we see the story of the 3 Hebrew children in the fiery furnace. And maturing times is when God brings trials in our life to help us grow. I think fire furnace was a trial, and worse than anything we've faced. And so they're thrown in verse 25 in Daniel 3 is what the king says, and everyone looks at this. It says, and he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. We always think of the king, and whoa, there's a 4th, it's the Son of God. And we're like, whoa, he saw the Son of God. What about the 3 Hebrew children? The ones that were thrown in? So they get thrown in, they look, and there's Christ right by them. Their trial gave them a unique view of God that no one else got to see except for them going through that trial. And that's what God does through us. Our trial gives us a unique view of God that we would never have seen if it weren't for the trial He brought in our life. And that is meant to grow and to bring fruit in our life. But if we forget about the trial, we're also going to forget about the view of God we saw in that trial. And so we see us going back to square one, because we forgot about the maturing time. But the third time is mundane times, or routine. And this is probably the most applicable one to us and the scariest one, because it's God's continual blessing. And we get used to it. And then it no longer becomes a thing where we grow upon, because we've gotten used to it. And an example of this is the manna. In Exodus 16:35 it says, and the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years. 3 meals a day, 365 days, we'll round it and say 1,000 meals a year. 40 years, 40,000 meals, they had the same food. We get mad if we have the same food once every 2 weeks, and that's we'll say, oh, they made this again, we just had this. When did you have it? Last week. They had it every single day for 40 years. And they got sick of it. In Numbers 11, 4 and 6, it says, "And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes." They got sick of God's blessing. If it weren't for that manna, they would have died. They had nothing to eat. Okay? And God provided them a blessing day after day after day for 40 years. And it became mundane. It became a routine to them. And they fell a-lusting, they cried, and they started complaining again. So, what is the solution? We see a problem. We see how we're supposed to have growth, but we never truly grow if we forget, because we end up where we were, and God's looking down from heaven saying, you were just there. And the answer is in Joshua chapter 4, where it has you open. What's the point of preaching if you don't have an answer? Verse 5 through 7. "And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take you up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off." Watch it. "And these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever." See, God knew that we have a tendency to forget about what we've learned. And God knew that we have a tendency to backtrack and to end up where we started because we forgot everything He's done in our life. And so He told the children of Israel to set up a memorial. And He told the children of Israel to have something to remember it by, so that when their children came, the children grew, they'd see that memorial and they'd remember what their fathers had told them, what that meant. And they'd grow a little bit, and then they'd look and they'd see that memorial, and then they'd keep what they've already learned, and they'd grow a little bit more. And they're not back where they started like the normal person is, who keeps forgetting. And so it's the memorial that makes the difference. So how does that apply practically? There's just some ideas. For the miraculous times, put the miracles on your prayer sheet, and then when you pray through the prayer sheet, thank God for them. For instance, Josh Rogers. That is a miracle. I mean, everyone that was part of that situation thought that he would be dead. The doctors thought he was going to die. The nurses thought he was dead and were shocked when he had visitors come. I'm sure he thought he was going to die when he was thrown off the bike. Okay? He was saved from the jaws of death miraculously by the Lord. And so if we put that on our prayer list and thank the Lord for Josh Rogers, when we have a test that we're worried about, I think it'll be okay. If God can save Josh Rogers' life, I think He can help us on a test. Yeah. And so if we have a memorial for the miracles in our life, it'll help us grow and it'll help us keep what we've learned. And that way we don't start back at square one. So for miraculous times, put it on your prayer sheet and pray over it. And of course, that's assuming that you have a prayer list, but we won't go there. Maturing times. Whenever you're going through a trial, keep a journal. Whether that's actually writing it out or typing it in Word or maybe in Evernote, or just making a journal of like what you're going through, what the Lord gave you in chapel or through your devotion, like the verses, or maybe through counsel you have. Write it out. Have like a story of the trial that you went through and see the unique view of God that God gives you through that trial. And when God grows you, and God grows you, and then the trial's gone, you've seen the view of God, God's delivered you, read back through it. And once you're not in the trial, go back through where you were and see again that view of God that you got through that trial. And that will keep you in remembrance. That will be the memorial for the maturing times in your life. And then third, the mundane times. For your devotions, these can become very mundane. If you do it every morning, every day of your life, it can become a routine. So what you do is write a verse that speaks to you, that the Holy Spirit shows you on a 3x5 card, and then maybe once a week, go through your stack of 3x5 cards and just go back through what the Lord has shown you and pull that verse and that verse. And so we see the miraculous times, the maturing times, and the mundane times. And the question you have tonight is God looking down from heaven to you and saying, you were just there.